We're talking about saving financial institutions, but what about saving the families? How is this going to impact them? I can't wait till we speak to the professor about that. First thing you have to do is assess the facts, and in this case we don't know what's real and we don't know what's perception. You have to be able to manage the reality, and I've not had the opportunity to speak to the chief to find out what he actually did. Right now these are just, as you indicated, accusations. I think he's limited because the mediums that he has accessible to him to communicate directly with the people of the city of Detroit are limited to non-existent. In terms of charging a fee, we've been floating this conversation around for at least 2 administrations, but people are so afraid that they're going to lose votes that they won't act on what they know may be in the best interest of the city. Let's talk about how we got to where we are and the load that we're carrying from a lack of action from past administrations. I mean, certainly Detroit, has its compromised challenges with public safety. We've got the density problem. We've got streetlight issues. So we have some issues that contribute to the problem. Retaining those people that are here. Certainly they deserve everything that the city can possibly give them for sticking it out, through some pretty tough times. If you think back, Andy Dillon and the governor indicated early on that he wanted the mayor and city council to work together and speak in one voice. The mayor's in great shape, but he's also human, and I think that his health needs to be and remain a priority. That we need to know about our presidential candidates. First, for Sarah Palin, she's proven herself to, 1, not be qualified, and 2, not to even be a politician. She can't even BS her. But she hasn't proven herself to be able to BS her way through the answers.
Too much BS in politics.
But foreign policy, I understand, but she's not qualified. But she's not articulate either. Even her use of the English language is disappointing. So I don't really think that this is coming out as an asset to her. And we need to know about our presidential candidates. Let George Bush work this out right now. And I think that McCain is leaving because he doesn't want to go up against Barack Obama.
So you've worked for a lot of high-profile politicians before who've been hit with scandal sometimes. What do you do out the gates when you hear something like this? Well, the first thing you have to do is assess the facts, and in this case we don't know what's real and we don't know what's perception. You have to be able to manage the reality, and I've not had the opportunity to speak to the chief to find out what he actually did. Right now these are just, as you indicated, accusations. You have women speaking on television talking about what has gone on, saying that Chief Gabi is a minister who sort of lured them into these relationships. What should the mayor do? Well, I think the mayor did what he was supposed to do. He has temporarily suspended the chief pending an investigation. He has to be able to do the same thing. He has to weigh what happened and what didn't happen. What are accusations? I mean, in a relationship, emotions sometimes overrule logic. And for someone to go through this and then file a lawsuit and keep messages, you have to wonder if there was anything premeditated in terms of what's going on. As a grown woman, how does someone lure you into something? So, I mean, there are a lot of factors in here. I understand that the chief was in the process of a divorce, so he's certainly free to date whomever he wants. So there are a lot of factors that just haven't come to the forefront yet before you can make a decision on what he should do. We have heard the chief filed for divorce in August. However, he's already gone through a scandal once, and Mayor Bing had to stand up for him because of that Monique Patterson and the affair with Warren Evans and with Chief Gabi, and now another scandal such as this. I mean, how does the mayor stand by his top cop, especially when crime is through the roof in Detroit right now? And I think those 2 factors are going to weigh in this a lot. One, that he's been through a situation before, so it's going to, make people second guess whether or not this did not happen. And then certainly there's a compromised department. Our police officers are underpaid, they're unhappy, crime is up. So if the department was stabilized, I think people would be a little more tolerant. So those 2 factors are going to weigh into, how this turns out publicly. I'm sure police officers, the public, and these ladies will have a say along with Chief Gabi and the mayor. So we'll have to see what happens in the next 30 days. Thank you so much, Karen, for coming in and joining us today.
The text message scandal. He has brought in national public relations and image experts. Do you think, in your opinion, he's handling this from a PR standpoint properly?
Well, I think, Fanchon, given the legal implications that are pending right now, I think he's handling it as best he can. I think he's limited because the mediums that he has accessible to him to communicate directly with the people of the city of Detroit are limited to non-existent. So I think that it limits his ability to talk to them directly. I think that has been somewhat of a detriment. But otherwise, because of the pending legal implications, I think he's limited in what he can do and say.
A lot of his critics have said that him coming out and talking about we're just focusing on the city and why is the city council taking time to deal with this issue, comes off as somewhat arrogant or that he has a large ego. Do you think that's a concern? Do you think his image experts are looking at that? Because that's the way a lot of people are taking this.
Well, I think that his confidence level has always been misinterpreted as arrogance. But I do think that he should and could still remain focused on the city. And I think that the other elected officials that were elected to do so should do the same. I mean, we still have a city that requires attention, that requires policy, practice, changes that need to be implemented. We've got a truancy rate that needs to be attended to. We've got a 47% illiteracy rate. We have more unsolved crimes than just the one that keeps making the headlines. We have things that require their attention. So yes, I think everybody should remain focused on the business at hand.
Should the mayor be charged today at 11 o'clock when Kim Worthy makes her decision? Do you think that will in any way change, or how will that change his PR, let's say, stance? Or
well, I think it could, but it won't necessarily, and that's because everybody says that the mayor has to be subjected to the same standards and laws that everybody else is, and that means that he has a legal due process that he's entitled to. So I think that I'm going to just take the same position and wait and see, and let's hope that her decision is just and fair for all involved.
If the mayor is charged, in your expert opinion as a PR specialist, what would you advise him to do, and how would you advise him to handle the media?
Well, I would have to first of all I would suggest that he comes out and speak directly in response to whatever her decision is. But then there's a legal component, and that requires legal input that I can't provide. So given what his legal options are, that would help to shape his public response.
But meanwhile, Karen Dumas, the polls show that most Detroiters supported the Belle Isle deal, and yet when it got to the council vote, it was 6-3, not to even vote on the issue at all. What's going on?
Well, I think Detroiters want the park to live up to its potential, like they do for this city. I think you saw the piece that I did the other day. I think council is at a point where they're almost afraid to show any degree of leadership.
Are they afraid of Malik Shabazz?
Oh, I don't know. I think he's kind of on their good side, but I think their unwillingness or their inability to make a decision is frustrating Detroiters. I mean, and people in the region, because they want to see some leadership. They want to see some action. The park is beautiful, but it's not kept at the level that it should be. And I have to say this, if in fact we could do something differently with the island in terms of leadership, then it should have been done. In terms of charging a fee, we've been floating this conversation around for at least 2 administrations. But people are so afraid that they're going to lose votes that they won't act on what they know may be in the best interest of the city.
Karen Dumas,
and ask people
you
about
are
Dave
a
Bing.
former appointee of Dave Bing. How would you answer that?
Well, my thing is that the city is operationally dysfunctional. It's not set up for progress. It's really not. I mean, people always say, Karen, why don't you run for this? Why don't you run for that? I'm not going to run for anything because it's not set up to succeed right now. It's too much process. So whomever comes in next, whether it's an emergency manager or the next mayor, has to operationally restructure how this city functions. If not, we're just going to continue to repeat the same problems. We talk about more money. It's not a matter of more money. It's better management and application of the money that you have.
By the way, I went to a party where you were the featured guest, and at this party, in attendance, Dave Bing, Benny Napoleon, and Mike Duggan. What does that say about
and Charlie LaDuff?
Oh, he's not running.
I didn't see any of those guys.
Have you decided which person you will support?
No, I have not.
Meanwhile, your name was also mentioned in the Kwame Kilpatrick trial as a possible witness for the defense. Where does that stand?
Well, don't believe everything that you hear. I am not on the list. I got a call from a reporter saying that he heard my name was on the list, but my attorney confirmed with me this afternoon I am not on the list.
So the solution, though, we have Belle Isle, we need to repair it. We have a city we need to repair and fix. What do we do?
Well, I think in the upcoming election, we need to look past rhetoric. We all know that we want the lights on, we want, safer streets, we need resources for our public safety, but I want to hear a strategy on how those things are going to be delivered, how Detroiters are going to be engaged, and how we are going to work both locally and regionally.
I think you've got to be conscientious of your surroundings.
You've got to be cautious
Is that true?
everywhere. I mean, I would say
But more so in Detroit, though.
Well, I think any place, and Emily and I have talked about this, I mean, we've had a great discussion, and I think that that, you know, we've now connected on a different level. And we talked about some other areas that we have, you know, been exposed to, lived in or worked in. You have to be careful everywhere. I mean, certainly Detroit, you know, has its compromised challenges with public safety. We've got the density problem. We've got streetlight issues. So we have some issues that contribute to the problem. But people have to be careful.
Do you feel
Crime
safe,
is a
Karen?
social issue.
Do you feel safe
No,
in Detroit?
I don't. I don't.
Well, you live in a nice area of Detroit, and you don't feel safe?
No, I don't. I am careful all of the time. I mean, and I'll be honest with you. There was once that I was going home and there was nobody there. I called somebody to ask them to watch me, and I just, you know, I mean, I do sometimes you get overly sensitive or overly conscious, but yeah.
And the rules are different in Detroit.
Welcome back to From the Mayor's Office with Chris Brown and Tom Lajana. We are talking budget deficit dollars. So, gentlemen, what now? Our census is down. Certainly the economic climate at the state and the federal level are different than they were before. But why the sense of urgency for the city of Detroit? What's different today?
Yeah, one of the things in addition to those two large factors is probably the trifecta. It's the EFM legislation. And as you know, the state legislature has passed that recently, and it gives new powers to financial managers. The issue for us is that requires for us to table a deficit elimination plan, a structural deficit elimination plan. Perhaps, Tom, you can kind of outline where we are on that and where we're going.
Well, hold on. Before we get to that, let's talk about EFM. Isn't that a dressed-up way of saying bankruptcy for a city? I mean, what exactly would the emergency financial governance enable us to do, and compare it with what I keep hearing about a consent agreement?
Sure.
Let's distinguish between those two things.
So the emergency financial manager...
Let me bring Karen Dumas in here, because you have worked closely with Mayor Dave Bing before some difficulties forced you to leave, but you know what goes on behind closed doors, and many are wondering why Dave Bing didn't sound the warning bell until this week. He should have done it a year ago, some would say.
But Huel, I mean, in all honesty, this is, you know, a lot of people said, well, we didn't hear anything new yesterday. And that's a good thing. The mayor has said the same thing for the longest. I mean, nobody's listening. If you think back, Andy Dillon and the governor indicated early on that he wanted the mayor and city council to work together and speak in one voice. So for council members to sit here tonight and say, we want to speak together, they had those instructions early on. The mayor's talked about health and pension reform, health care and pension reform, union concessions, operational restructuring. I mean, that conversation took place from the time he stepped foot in office. So this conversation is nothing new.
1,000 to 2,000 layoffs, Karen?
Layoffs are not the solution. By the time you got through with the process, which could be anywhere from 3 to 6 months, you'd end up with 2 people laid off after a result of bumping rights and union rules, work rules. So you can't lay off and you can't cut your way out of the situation. Detroit has to change who it is and how it's doing business. It needs to be performance-based, and we need some creativity infused into how we generate revenue.
So maybe you should run the city.
She is. She did.
Thank you, and thank you for watching. That's it for this edition of Let It Rip.
What should his priority be, his job or his health?
Well, I think, Charlie, in any instance, your health should be a priority. I mean, whatever mistakes are made or whatever is done or not done can be undone or redone, except for your health. So the mayor's in great shape, but he's also human, and I think that his health needs to be and remain a priority. Welcome back to From the Mayor's Office with Carla Henderson today. Carla, thank you so much for being with us. The first segment, we talked about demolition, certainly something important to the residents, visitors here in the city of Detroit, and how that is the first leg of a larger project. We touched on the Detroit Works project, a land use analysis and strategy. Let's back up and start from the beginning. Detroit is 139 square miles, a lot of it vacant property. Let's talk about how the Detroit Works project will help figure out what we're going to do with all that vacant property.
Well, that's an excellent question. We have right now about 40 square miles of vacant property, and as we finish through the demolition, we know every day we're adding to that count.